Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast in which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and publishing. And today we are delighted to welcome a very special guest, Caryn McCann, who is a supernatural mystery author, here to talk to us all about that. And you have had such a fascinating life, Caryn. You've studied in Hong Kong and China. How are you doing today? Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm doing awesome, and thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's a delight to have you. We can't wait to hear everything you say. But before we begin, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland, and thanks for joining us, Caryn. So you've written a couple supernatural thrillers, and that's kind of what we want to talk to you about today, because recently we've had a few guests on that have written thrillers. But usually I don't think any of them really have written supernatural thrillers. They've been more, I guess, on the true crime side of it. And so the supernatural element really adds something interesting there, and we'll get into all that. So why don't you tell us a bit about, how you got started with this? Because I know you're a relatively new author. You've written a couple books now, but one of them is not yet published. But yeah, give us a little quick history of yourself, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, my husband got transferred to Hong Kong, and that's what started this all. So we moved to Hong Kong many years ago, and I, being the trailing spouse, had the wonderful opportunity to study Chinese. So I studied Mandarin in Hong Kong and in China. I also worked in the Chinese film business, and back then I was marketing American films to Chinese audiences. And at the time, I was watching Chinese movies, and like any crazy writer, I thought I could write better than that. Well, it's like anything, screenplays and novels, it's not as easy as it looks. And I got a little bit far on a few scripts, but nothing got made. I did attach talent. We moved back to the US years later, and I discovered self-publishing. And what a new world that is. And I don't need a producer. I don't need $1 million. I don't need a director. I don't need a star. I mean, it was like, wow, where has this been all my life? So here I am.
Well, that's great. But so what would make you want to put that supernatural twist on things as opposed to just like more of the straight thriller? Because I know, when I think about supernatural mixing in with thriller, you're sort of like two different genres there. You're almost like the fantasy versus the thriller genre, and I guess you want to make sure that you satisfy both sort of readers, I guess. There's obviously a reader that just likes supernatural thriller, but I think you also kind of sometimes want to try to pull in those people that really like thrillers and people that like sort of that the fantastistical stuff, right? But you want to do it in a way that doesn't annoy both of them. There's enough of each thing. How do you manage that?
Well, let me tell you the log line for book one, and that will then I'll get into how it works. So book one is called The Emperor's Curse, and the log line is: a determined cop thinks a gold rush museum robbery is just small town mischief until it pulls her into a hunt for a lost immortality elixir made from gold dust, whose ancient myth has been fueling greed and murder for centuries. And how the myth does the narrative work, first of all, you can kind of see my Chinese background has obviously influenced these stories. It's a unique selling point on my part. But how this works is there's, first of all, in this myth, it's actual fact. The emperors of China 2,000 years ago ordered their alchemists to create an immortality elixir. Now, I just added gold dust to it for the story. Now, true fact, also in the 1880s, Chinese came over to California during the gold rush looking for fame and fortune. So in my story, in the 1880s, a grave robber steals this immortality elixir and flees to Gold Rush, California. And then in present day, the medical researcher stumbles upon the body after this massive rainstorm and finds this elixir. He creates a miracle cure for plants, but his biotech bosses want to test it on humans. So this obsession with immortality ripples across centuries into this present day case.
Right. I love that.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So do you, I guess that's the only sort of mysticism or supernatural element in it. It's not like, people are walking around with powers and, able to, tell the future and solve their crimes through that sort of.
Well, that's a good point. I should mention that this is a series, and each series is going to take place over a Chinese holiday. And the first two books, book one is a year ago, and then book two is a year later, over the Hungry Ghost Festival. And in Asian culture, during that month of the Hungry Ghost Festival, the dead can cross over to the living. So in book 1 and 2, it's during the Hungry Ghost Festival. And yes, the protagonist does see her murdered fiance's ghost. But I wanted to call this supernatural light because I really want to lean on crime fiction. So the reader can decide, yes, it's a real ghost, or B, it's her stress and her guilt that is making her see this. So to get back to the original question about the myth, first you've got the immortality legend, and that explains why people will kill for this gold dust. And then these characters believe in this elixir, and that drives their fear and betrayal. So also the setting is key here. It takes place in Folsom, California, which is the home of the gold rush, which explains why the Chinese grave robber ended up there and his body was there for 150 years. But I wanted to keep this credible, but make sure that the myth works. So this is why I call it supernatural light. So the elixir, first of all, is framed as a dangerous proto-biotech. It's not magic. And then secondly, I wanted to very clearly make sure that the crimes are solved by human motive and evidence. It's not some miracle solution. It's not magic.
Right.
And then the motives are very clearly power, fear of aging, fear of death. And in the few ghost moments I have, the protagonist, the reader can choose, is that supernatural or is that grief or stress?
Right. I think that's a smart way to do it. I think that a lot of thriller readers, especially crime thriller, it seems, they want to have that ability to watch them go through the process of figuring things out and not have them just magically come up with the solution. Yeah. That would seem a little less it's not just credible, but just satisfying, maybe, right? Because it's
exactly.
Like when you read
smart when you read a book like that, because as the protagonist figures things out, you figure things out, and you're like, oh, this mystery is deepening. I love it. It's like, it's like being fed potato chips. You can't stop at just one. You've got to keep eating them.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about this is that the name of my protagonist is Paige Gold, and she is white, she's Western, and she's skeptical. Now she happens to have a Chinese boyfriend, which allows her to enter this Chinese community. But she is the doorway for readers into Chinese holidays, into Chinese lore, into criminal societies. So I'm very cognizant of the fact that a lot of Americans, a lot of Westerners don't know these myths, don't know Chinese folklore, and that is new and fresh, I hope, for a mystery thriller. But I want to emphasize it's very grounded crime fiction, and there's a light supernatural element, but it's very clearly the mysteries are solved with evidence. There's no, oh, there's the gun, it just appeared, there's a smoking gun, crime solved. It's not that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the one thing I don't like when I read or watch mysteries. If things don't line up and there's no way you could have ever figured it out because they've held things back, or it's like becomes like, oh, it's only one, they could only do it because they have this very specific knowledge or power or whatever, then it's just not at all satisfying, right? So I think
Exactly.
that is makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it really helps to have that one user who can be the I don't know what's going on, let me explain it, or have it explained to me, so that because you're right, a lot of people, I don't know much Chinese folklore, so it makes sense, and you don't want to have to have a big exposition bomb where you have to explain everything in one big long thing. So you have a character who sort of, it comes out naturally through what's going on, right?
Exactly. And she has the excuse, I mean, she's a cop. And so she has the reason to be investigating. And it hits close to home. It's her fiance that gets into this danger. So she's also unaware and very skeptical. So I wanted someone who doesn't believe in these myths, doesn't believe in magic, to be the doorway for Western readers.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You've made a lot of, I think, really smart choices. And given that this was your first book, how did you sort of come up with all this stuff? Like in the sense of like how you wanted to put it all together. I guess you have read a lot of this genre, right? But have you studied sort of writing books? How did you decide to put it all together in the way that you've done? Because it does, like I said, it does sound like you made some pretty smart choices.
Thank you. It started out as a screenplay. And at the time, I decided to try. Originally, when I wrote these screenplays, I was very naive, and I just had enormous budgets. I mean, I did not read screenplay books that told you, I think there's a book out in screenplay land that's Getting to the Green Light, and it's all about genres that are marketable, and
Right.
that would be like Christmas movies, horror movies, female-led thrillers, the aging action star, like Sylvester Stallone or Arnold or whoever.
Right.
And so when back then in Hong Kong, I was writing, my screenplay fell between two stools. It wasn't Chinese enough, and it wasn't American enough, and it had an American protagonist in Hong Kong or China, and that was kind of a hard sell. The budget was the killer. So when I got back to the US, when we got back, I originally still tried to do these Chinese co-productions. And at that time, China was still pushing money into Hollywood. But so I lowered the budget. I changed the script. I had a B-level actress, a martial arts actress. I had a action director. I had an actor attached, but still couldn't get it off the ground. And after banging your head against the wall for so many years, and I know you just interviewed a screenwriter a few weeks ago, and I'm like, now he's very established, he's very successful. But for someone like me who is trying to break in, it was still a hard sell. And I said, well, why keep knocking my head against the wall? Why not turn this into a novel, and then I can control it. I can sell it how I like. And it's wonderful. I mean, so much freedom that you have, as you guys know, for being a self-published author. So it started out as a screenplay. That's sort of a long and roundabout answer, but it started out as a screenplay.
Yeah, it's funny, back in I guess probably the 90s, maybe, that's when this was happening so much. I remember I was a big fan of a lot of that, the Fish Out of Water, which was often action movies, which was often, Chinese, like Jackie Chan or Jet Li, or, and they'd come to America and they'd, pair him up with Chris Tucker, Rush Hour, and all those movies where, and it's interesting because when you're talking about that, I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, those movies have sort of disappeared, and I don't really see it so much anymore. So yeah.
Well, the other thing when I would go to these film markets is that lately a lot of these production companies would say, well, is it based on IP? Is it based on a book? Or is it based on a New York Times article? Or is it based on a short story or a song or something that they could go to their bosses and say, so look, there's an audience out there. So on one hand, I still write screenplays, but I've learned at least write commercial genres, like Christmas movies or rom-coms or something. But as far as if you still want to sell your book or your screenplay to Hollywood, if you can prove there's an audience already, if you can say, look at my sales numbers, or you can, you have your own audience. And that's the other thing that I think screenwriters, it's really a tough business, especially nowadays, with the networks. In the old days used to make 21, 22 episode TV series. Now it's 6 episodes, 8 episodes, 4 episodes. And these writers' rooms that maybe had 10 or 12 writers, maybe now have 2. Some shows it's one person. Like Downton Abbey, that series was written by one guy. Amazing. Right. So the jobs for screenwriters, it's a little, dare I say, bleak. Now, for the people who are established or whatever, or maybe Christmas movies, maybe there's still a market for that. That who knows? But I love action movies. I love thrillers, and I like being in control of my destiny. I don't have to worry about Hollywood saying yes. I just write the stories, and yes, the market will decide these are good or not. But I'm having a great time writing them.
Well, that's the main thing, isn't it? Everyone's always going on about, AI is going to replace writers. It's like, until AI can lock themselves away for 8 hours and just get obsessed with whatever they're writing, then it doesn't stand a chance.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is true for authors that from the trad world too, right? It's like, they used to always have to try to sell to the big publishing houses and the gatekeepers that they had to go through there, but then they all realized the same sort of thing that you're talking about. It's like, just self-publish, and you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to worry about any of that. I mean, you have to worry about other things, but it's the same sort of thing that you're worrying about. It's like, now you're the marketer, now you're you've got to handle getting the cover done and the editing and all that. But everything is in your hands. You get to make all the decisions. They're not taken away from you. And that's, I think, really important to a lot of authors. I mean, most authors, I think, you always hear about, they wanted to make changes and I didn't want to. And, it's like creative control. And I think if you sold your screenplay, you're more likely going to have it completely changed, by the end of it, than if you published it as a book. You have way more creative control.
Yeah. The other big difference, I would say, between screenwriting and novel writing is screenplay writing, you really can't do much until someone gives you the green light. But with novel writing, you are really an entrepreneur. I mean, you do the marketing, you do the PR, you do the production scheduling, you grow your own audience. And I love that. I love the business side of it, which I never really experienced as a screenwriter. And I was never, when I did, I wouldn't say producing, it was more like creative producing, where I would contact Chinese stars or Chinese producers to attach them to my screenplay. That was about the extent of my producing. The novel writing is so much more suited to my personality because I like marketing, and I'm learning so much. I'm one of those Clifton Strengths things. I'm a big learner. And I love to learn new skills. And marketing, you never marketed your screenplay or tried to test market it by trying to sell it on Amazon. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, you'd have to write a novella or something. But no, self-publishing has really opened the door. Now, yes, the flip side of that is that it has opened the door to a lot more competition, but that's where your unique voice comes in. And especially, I hope in my case, my Chinese background a little bit sets me apart from most of the mystery thrillers on the market. And I also think there's, a need for something that is, people like to experience different worlds, I think, when they open a book. It's especially if it's like a different culture. And one of the books that I was reading recently, it actually, I discovered it through Netflix. Netflix made a TV series called Dark Winds. And the books, it was based on like life on the Navajo Nation in Arizona in the 70s. And it's like, as an American, I don't really know much history about the American Indian. And of course, it's a great police procedural or crime story. It's crime drama. I was hooked. And I think a lot of writers like that fresh point of view aspect.
I love that, because you think we think of Native Americans and you think the Old West. You don't actually realize that Native American culture still exists, and there are reservations, and I think there's that Reservation Dogs, and there are some shows that cover it.
Yes,
Yellowstone
right.
goes into it a bit, but that is a completely different world that most people aren't even aware that exists, and then you get to be a part of it through shows like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I see I see why that sort of draws you, because the native people have a strong sense of mysticism and
Right.
And belief in the spiritual world and the connection to the earth and this and that, right? So I imagine that kind of thing is similar to what you were describing, in that you can have a police procedural in that world, and people could they could be talking about their own mysticism, and the person viewing it could make their own decisions about whether that is a real thing that they're seeing or experiencing, or they're just, they think they are. It's sort of what you were saying about letting the reader decide, is that all in their mind, or are they really experiencing it? And I think that's sort of very similar, which is probably why it drew you.
Well, thank you for saying that, Craig, because I did not realize that until this second that you said it, that those two cultures do have that in common, and it is what drew me in. And so thank you for that, because I did. Yeah, you just never know, why you like certain things, but that's great. I did one of these AI programs where it says, I know AI is a dirty word, but AI, it's like find your reader avatar. And it was so fascinating, because you upload your script, and it's, they gave me like 5 avatars, and one of them was called Tactical Travis, a guy who goes to the gun range and likes the law and order kind of aspect, and he doesn't believe in authority, or kind of, because the first book takes aim at big pharma and the biotech world, and and then another avatar was Carla conspiracy theory. I'm like, really? Okay, why not? If maybe I should expand my circle of targets. And of course, there was another avatar that was someone who was culturally diverse and wanted to see their culture reflected in entertainment. Not 100%, have it, every single person has got to be XYZ race, but just something where they feel like they're seen. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to go through this program where it's like, well, here are your 5 reader avatars, and like half of them, I'm like, really? Huh, I would have never guessed. So
that's a really interesting idea. That goes into marketing to us. You were so on the money when you were talking about like marketing is so important with self-published authors, and you have to approach marketing with a professional thing. And when I used to work in an advertising agency, we had those avatars, and think like, who are the 5 people who are going to have to buy my book, and
exactly.
that can make all the difference.
One thing I will say that I'm too green to do paid advertising, and I'm going to have 2 books at the end of this month. So this one is my first one. The Emperor's Curse is the first one. But personally, it's such a black hole, Amazon and Facebook, the algorithm and all this, and it's so complicated. So my idea is I'd rather focus like on bulk buyers. And one thing that my book has that is very unique is gold dust is a very key element, and it will be throughout the series. So I can see going to, well, first of all, I know I'm going to go to companies, the story takes place in Folsom, California, the home of the gold rush. And there's a lot of tourism, hotels, tours, ghost tours, gold rush tours, Airbnbs, that kind of, So there's a lot of museums or local culture or local businesses that I could reach out to and say, hey, do you want to give your clients a book or something? So that is one part of marketing. Find something in your book that could appeal to a nonfiction kind of setting. So in my case, it's the gold. And there's a million ways you can slice that pie. You could go to gold rush companies. You could go to, there's actually luxury cosmetics, that cost like $900 an ounce that put real gold into their creams. No kidding. And I'm like, okay, there's a VIP gift. Here's my book with your expensive cosmetic. So we'll see how it goes. It's just, I can think of a million ideas, and I'm only scratching the surface.
I like that.
Yeah, we just did an episode talking about different marketing ideas and how you have to be unique like that. And it definitely helps to stand out from everyone by doing something different. And it's often comes down to creativity and what you can think how you can tie your book into something. And like you're saying with gold dust, and sometimes it's hard to figure, if you write a book that's super generic, it's sometimes hard to think, how would I separate this out? But when you've written about something very specific, there are a lot more avenues to follow there. And I think also, you have that idea of almost like two different audiences, right? You could be targeting that crime fiction. You could be targeting the Chinese mysticism readers in different ways. So when you're putting a book like this together, though, I get the idea that you want to keep your procedural credibility and you appeal to those fans, but you also want to work in the myth. And you had mentioned to me, that the myth does more than narrative work in a book like this. So how do you work that? Like, how do you build that sort of those two things together? And what are some of your techniques or tips that you have for other people that want to sort of marry those two ideas?
Well, one thing I would say is that if a writer wants to use a myth for their story, the myth can't solve the crime. I mean, you have to use human logic. So there's got to be a reason, evidence, or something that solves the crime. Unless you're writing fantasy, that's a different story. And my contract with the reader is that there's no paranormal shortcuts. There's no like, oh, I can read your mind, or the ghost told me who the killer is. That doesn't happen. So you have to find something that attracts you, that's interesting to you. And maybe it's in your own culture. Maybe, you have generations ago some stories of ancestors from other countries. That would be a great place to start. But you can't have the protagonist solve things so easily that it kind of wipes out the whole crime fiction element. There's got to be, good policing, good crime solving. Otherwise, the reader is going to feel shortchanged.
It's kind of like how Agatha Christie in her later books, she had these twists like, oh, the killer was actually the narrator of the story, and it felt cheap. It felt like a cop-out.
I think I would be a little angry if I got to the end of the book and I discovered, what?
That's like the old, and then I woke up.
Yes.
It was all just a dream. So did you put any more limits on yourself other than, the paranormal can't solve the crime when you were deciding about how much, I guess, paranormal to add to the book? Or was that pretty much your hard limit and then everything else was like wherever the story takes you?
Well, the bigger, what's going to go on throughout the whole series is this immortal elixir, and that for 2,000 years, there's been that story, and that is because the first two books are based on the holiday of the Hungry Ghost Festival. And then after that, we move into the next holiday, which is the Mid-Autumn Festival. And then I'll open up the next one with the Chinese New Year or something. So the paranormal aspect, the bigger, if you want to call it supernatural, is the myth of the immortal elixir. And in book one, we see how it has this miracle cure potential for plants. And what causes the murder is the biotech bros want to test it on humans. And then in book two, we get in, which comes out end of this month, we see that it has the capability stronger than raising dead plants. And so that is the curiosity factor. So I use this gold dust that the protagonist has as the through line through the series, and that people will kill for it, and that is based on Chinese history. So I think that's where I lean, is not the paranormal aspect after book two, but more this immortality elixir, which, gold has an allure today. And even today, billionaires are trying to live to 150 years old, no kidding. And there's this human desire to outrun death. And then I marry that with gold, which, gold fever or whatever you want to call it is very alluring, and it's very visual, gold dust, and how people, it will push people to make good choices, bad choices. So that's sort of where I'm headed, is the elixir and man's search for evading death, and B, the allure of gold and what people will do for it.
Yeah, it makes sense to marry two really popular topics like that. And I guess, when you're saying a lot of the or maybe all of the mysticism and paranormal aspects are sort of left to the reader to decide whether that really is paranormal, I guess even with the elixir, it could be that it's magic, but it could also just be, some sort of compound that, a lot of our drugs come from plants and
right.
herbs, and Chinese medicine, some people think is not real, other people think it is. It's just they use things in ways we haven't figured out yet, right? So it doesn't mean they have magical powers. It just means that, like, there's something in it that is good for us, or has some sort of benefit. So I guess in your book, that's sort of how you're also working it. Whereas, like, okay, there is an elixir that will make people live forever, but you're not necessarily saying it's magic. It could be just, synthesize it.
I just read a paper yesterday about how they had discovered that your brain, every night when you sleep, your cranial fluid gets drained and then refilled, and it's almost like doing an oil change to your car. And people used to think that your cranial fluid would flow to your blood flow, and that's how they get rid of it. And they just found out it flows into your lymphatic system, and they're like, this changes everything. And then they start talking about how acupuncture impacts that, and it's like, wow, maybe all of this Eastern medicine, there was much more to it than we thought, because we, being Westerners, thought we knew everything, but actually,
So so in book 1 and 2, the paranormal part is, is it a ghost or is it threats? And then the elixir is it some kind of mysterious immortality elixir, or is this, and we don't get into, unless we write here for 500 years, none of these characters are going to live forever. But is it curing someone with this immortality elixir, or is it just extreme biotech? So in the first few books, this is, the reader can decide. It's not, so I don't get into the it's magic. No, it's totally grounded is the word I guess I want to say.
And I love that. I love when you have something that feels really grounded, but it's inexplicable. That's where the weird feelings get going about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, it really allows you to sell to, I think, a wider audience, because there might be some people that don't want to read about supernatural, like they don't want magic in the book, but you're not necessarily saying it is. They're just unexplained. I mean, crime is filled with unexplained mysteries, so people should be accepting about something like that. It's unexplained. We're not saying it's magic, and we're not saying it's not.
It's crime fiction, but with a shimmer of the uncanny, and the reader can decide. So I'm not pushing any magic. It's not magic. It's grounded crime fiction, but there is just enough of a shimmer to make people think, well, maybe.
Yeah. So again, like when you have a book like this, and you're talking about like you enjoy the marketing side of it, which is actually very rare. Most authors hate the marketing side of it. And there is a supernatural thriller market out there too, but sometimes when you have a book that has two different concepts in it, it's sometimes trickier to market it, because it's like, can I sell this to a straight thriller reader? Can I sell this to a more fantastical reader? And where do I find all those? So have you how has your marketing gone for this, and what route did you take? Have you been focusing on like trying to find people that like this specific thing, or are you just trying to do separate marketing efforts? Is like, I'm going to sell it as more of a thriller here, and I'll sell it as more, I'll pump up the mysticism side of it over here.
I'm probably not going to even try for the supernatural part, because in my book, and no pun intended, this is very supernatural light, and it's so grounded, and I don't want to go the fantasy route or the magic route, and that is absolutely not what I wrote. So my plan is, and how I'm marketing it at the moment, is I've got the newsletter, and I do these promotions with other authors, and sometimes we do book giveaways, and I'm staying away from paid advertising, as I mentioned, for a while. And second of all, I plan to do, and in fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I did an author event in Folsom, California, the home of the gold rush. And I did my little thing at this wine bar, and it was called The Vine, and it was wonderful. And there was a few other patrons at the bar that were not part of my little shindig. And one of the people came to my talk, went over to the bar to get a drink, and she was talking up to some lady. The lady later, after my talk, came over to me. She's like, "I'd like to buy your book." And I said, no. It rained it was a rainy night, unfortunately. I said, "You're here, you can have this book for free." And I told her about it, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, "I work for the Folsom Historical Society, and we would love to do a joint promotion with you. And, would you like to come to our gala? We're having it in October." I'm like, wow, you are like, what serendipity. So sometimes doing these events, first of all, you never know who you're going to meet. And second of all, I chose Folsom very particularly because that's my story. And my next event, I wanted to either be something either to do with the Chinese community or something, not a bookstore, because I don't think there's enough foot traffic in a bookstore. And I want a place where there's already an audience, people are already there. And, or some very fun location. For example, one location in my book is a storage unit, U-Haul or those places. I'm like, how they have a store. Yeah. I'm like, it would be fun. How they have storage wars. It's like, what's behind
Yeah, I love those.
the thing? I'm like, wouldn't that be fun to have a book signing there? Anyway, there's a lot of places that isn't in my book that I could think of for a potential author event. But yeah, marketing, I'm sticking to the crime fiction crowd, and it's going to be low key in the beginning, just to A, get the books finished, and B, get my newsletter email subscriber list up. But another thing I have found that I think is very interesting is I do book trailers, and I'm making the trailer for book 2 now. And it's really fun. It's not that expensive, thanks to AI. Sorry, I know some people think AI is a dirty word, but it is, for a screenwriter especially, to see your idea as a tiny little trailer is just, it takes your breath away. It's like, oh my gosh, I can see it. It comes to life. And you can see my book trailer on my website for book 1, and book 2 will be up in a week or two. And that's how I think you can really market your book quickly, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and it's shareable. Anyway, I'm a film nerd, so I'm big on book trailers.
Yeah.
Book trailers, that's a great topic.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you're sort of entering a different medium, and able to capture readers from, places that you normally couldn't go if you're just writing print, right? You can put them on YouTube or on TikTok, or so it makes a lot of sense to put them in that, especially with your background of screenwriting.
Yeah.
And you probably think visually, right? Not all authors do, but like you said, AI can sort of take that and build it for you these days. So yeah.
Eventually they might even be able to make the whole movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. We've spoken to quite a few people who turned their screenplay into a book. And I mean, my son is going off to study screenwriting at college. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because screenwriting is, it's quite dialogue heavy. And I think dialogue is a good way to push a story. It's very visual. So maybe that's screenwriting is a very effective first step in establishing your story.
Yeah, it made writing the books, the first one, easier, because I already had a 105-page script. So the outline was done, and all I had to do was fill it in. And so that one, from that, now I'm on book 3, and I'm like, it's a blank slate. So book 3, it's like, oh boy, I got to do a lot more work here on this one.
Yeah, no, I get it. And like I said, a lot of authors have problems with the marketing side of it, but it sounds like you have a dearth of ideas. And it's interesting, because we did just have someone on talking about that, and it really opened my eyes to some thinking outside the box when it comes to marketing. And then having you come on and talk about this, it's really making me think that this is sort of the way that authors should be thinking about marketing their books, and trying to set themselves outside of what the norm is. everybody's advertising here, you go advertise over here,
right? And
then you're not competing against 8 million other authors.
Exactly. I have no intention of going on Amazon or Facebook and doing ads, and I'm not interested in doing a bookshop talk. Maybe at a Chinese temple, maybe, who knows, but something, you just have to stand out. And if you dig deep enough, you can find something in your book or in your background that would appeal to a segment of your readership. So yeah, go for it.
I love that. And you know what? We approach from the top of the hour, but that's actually a beautiful sentiment to wrap things up with. So I love it. Now, before we ask you to tell everyone where they can find your book, more about you, I was going to ask if, Craig, you had any final questions?
No, listen, I think this has been a really interesting discussion. And, there's a lot of people out there that want to write stuff that sort of straddles a couple different genres. And, supernatural fiction or crime fiction, that's one of those ones that goes well together. I think about, it's similar to, I guess, urban fantasy. People write, a little bit of magic, but set in the real world, you know, and so you're trying to like ease a new kind of reader into to something different, and I like that idea, and I think it's sometimes more difficult in different ways, especially when it comes to maybe some of the marketing. But the way you've done it, and not going too hard on the supernatural side, I think that has allowed you to keep your focus on sort of that crime fiction, but still, you know, explore some of those other ideas. So I think it's well done, and I appreciate you coming on and giving us your time and telling us about it.
Well, thank you, Craig. Thank you, Roland, for having me. This has been a wonderful talk, and I'm glad I could share this with your listeners.
Well, talking about our listeners and those viewing on YouTube, where can people find out more about you and more about your book?
It would be my website, which is CarynMcCann.com, and Caryn is spelled Caryn. McCann, McCann.com. That's where they can get a free short story and get on my newsletter and find out all the crazy things I'm doing. And it's that's where the best place is to find me.
That's wonderful. Well, we will make sure to pop a link to that down below in the description. So scroll down there, click on the link, and go and check out Caryn's stuff. And while you're down there, you'll pass that big empty comment section. So make sure you stop and leave Caryn a comment and let her know how much you've appreciated everything she shared with us today. And while you're there, there's that subscribe button if you haven't already. There is that like button, give that a smash, as the kids say, and a bell icon that will alert you every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked. And of course, there will be a brand new episode of Fully Booked coming out next week. So until then, cheerio.